Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Today we're talking about Bottle Rocket, Wes Anderson's 1996 feature film debut, starring Luke Wilson and Owen Wilson. Owen also co-wrote the screenplay with Wes. And my guests are the assistant director team. First up, returning to the show is Jim Goldthwait, who worked as the first AD on Bottle Rocket. Nice to see you again, Jim.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
Also returning to the show is Heather Kritzer, who was the key second AD on Bottle Rocket. Welcome back, Heather.
Thank you.
And finally, making his Below the Line debut is Jim Flowers, who served as the second AD. Jimmy, welcome.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Now, a warning to listeners, today's conversation will contain spoilers for the film, so go see the film. I think the statute of limitations has expired on that. To kick off, though, now, Jim and Heather, maybe 2-3 years ago, we talked about LA Confidential here on the podcast. And I remember you saying, Jim, that was the first of your studio films. That came out in 97. This came out a little bit before. Give me a context of what this was as far as your career and how all of you guys got involved with Wes.
I got involved because of our line producer, Ray Zimmerman. Ray and I worked together on some independent films before this. And this was my last independent non-DJ film. So this got me the days that would get my book over the top and handed that in. So in between these, LA Confidential was my first studio film, but I did a few, non-studio DJ jobs in the beginning. But Ray was definitely the man that put all of us together. So we all owe a great deal to Ray Zimmerman. He was one of the best. After this, he went on to work at Columbia as a studio exec.
I came on board, obviously, the same way I came on board to LA Confidential through Jim Goldthwait, called to bring me on. And it was super exciting to go on location in Texas. And yeah, it was an adventure that one would be super excited to go jump into. So I drove myself out to Texas.
Now, Jimmy, did you know these guys before, or were you local to Texas? And how did you
No, well, it was actually kind of crazy. I was going back to Texas because I grew up in Fort Worth, but next to Dallas, but we called it East Fort Worth, Dallas. But anyway, no, I'd actually met Jim, and Jim was a great mentor for me. Jim and I met on a film called Frank and Jesse. It was a Western with Bill Paxton and Rob Lowe shooting in Arkansas. And I was working as a production assistant on it. And Jim, refresh my memory, was Jeff, I can't remember his last name.
Schiffman,
yes. The original first and second got fired off of that film, and I was already working on it. And Jim came in as the key second on that film, and that's how we met. And then Jim was a great mentor for me because after that film ended, he said, well, if you want to come out to LA, I'll try to get you onto some films out there. And so then we worked on True Crime, Alicia Silverstone's first film. And then Bottle Rocket came up. So I went back to Texas to work on that. And then I also worked later on. I also worked on LA Confidential with Jim and Heather. I was a production assistant on that. Jim was very instrumental in helping me get my days to get into the guild, and I've always been grateful about that. So he was a great early mentor. So it was great fun I've already worked with him and then go back to Texas. It's great.
Now, for all of you, I'm curious about your first impressions of the project. Now, when we say it's a Wes Anderson film, I mean, it's practically a genre of its own. People know what to expect in some ways, and just the early elements of those are there in Bottle Rocket. It wasn't the first of his films I saw, but then went back and watched it after I got interested in his other work. What was it like to get this fresh and not have sort of the future knowledge of what he was going to become as a film director?
For me, it was great because the backstory of this was that these guys created a short film that was at Sundance. I hadn't seen that, but once I was told about the project, they sent me a script and I read it, and I'm like, a little quirky, what's going on. But then once I saw the short, it just went, oh my God, I know exactly what they're going to do, laugh out loud. And, so like you said, it was Wes. It was 100% Wes. So I was all 100% in once I read the script and saw the short. So it was definitely not, when you do independent little films, a lot of the scripts are very similar. I was like, oh, it's a great script. And you go, yeah, it's the exact same one I read last week, but the guy got killed a different way. You read this and it's totally different.
Yeah.
There's nothing. When I was watching a behind the scenes recently, and Owen was talking about the Digman character, and I think he's totally true. There's no character like that even to this day. I mean, it was totally unique, and to watch his emotions and everything go through it was a great experience.
Now, for other folks who might not be familiar with the short, I found it on YouTube,
It's also on Amazon Prime, by the way.
where I think you can watch it without the YouTube interruptions. Although now I think Prime is interrupting stuff now as well. So depending on what level of payment you're doing.
Right away, it was clear that Wes had a voice and a very specific vision for this. And that was something that I was enrolled in right away with him, because he's such a unique person when you're engaging with him, and everything was so specific that I was literally enthralled with him, because I think we all felt that the movie was going to be memorable and quite unique. And we were part of something that was special, which you don't always know when you're shooting. And the characters that the Owen brothers, and also Bob, when I was just rewatching it, the character of Bob is so fantastic. I mean, they were just superstars right out the gate to me. I knew they had the charisma and what it took to have a career. And I don't think any of us were surprised by their success at all.
This felt different from the get-go. And even though they were all new to doing a film for real, there was a real sense of confidence and just everybody knew what was going on. I mean, that was very unique, because Jim and I had worked on the other film with a first-time director on true crime, and it was a totally different experience. Some of my favorite joking film things that came off of that film. As someone who had no idea what they were doing, and then to go to someone with Wes who knew exactly what he was doing. And so it was great.
Wes just was so clear in his vision and his ideas that there was no doubt. He had no doubt in what he was doing. He was super confident, and therefore was a good leader in that way. Because I remember I was telling the guys last week when we were prepping a little bit, I remember the extras casting meeting where we sit down with the director and we go page by page and talk about every single extra in every scene and what they look like and how old are they. And he was so specific and uniquely specific, and expected what he was asking for. And I was taking copious notes, and I think we gave him what he wanted. I don't think there was a misstep with any of the background roles or any of it. And I also think that the guys' performances, I mean, the Dignan role and also Luke's role, they didn't have a false note in the movie. And I don't remember, Jim, was there a lot of rehearsal, or were those guys kind of because I was obviously doing call sheets and running around and locking up and all that stuff, but I mean.
Yeah, they did rehearse. I think part of the charm was, or the experience for these fellows was, they did a lot of rehearsals as they were writing it. So
yeah.
they, Columbia, James Brooks and Polly Platt, they brought them out here, and they had a place in, I don't know, I forgot where they put up, but Owen and Wes were on payroll more or less. They were getting per diem and everything, and then Luke just kind of crashed with them. But I actually, the behind the scenes thing is pretty good. And they were talking about how towards the end they had this important table read, so that James Brooks was going to say yes or no, I'm going to put the money into it. So they did a lot of rehearsals. And also, Owen was in the writing room, so they had the characters down. I mean, it definitely showed. I mean, like Jimmy said, sometimes you do these little independents, and you're like, okay, this guy's going, I am reading the script and I do not put any acting into this, and these guys, they were acting day one. I will say though, they they weren't production savvy. Like Wes knew exactly what he wanted. Film history, 100%. Colors, visions, 150%. But the very first day we did a camera test and I roll sound and I look at Wes and he's standing there and I go, action. And Wes goes, oh yeah, action. So it was like that. And then from then on, we had the word of the day. Today's word is martini. Today's word is, Abby, and tell the history of Abby and things like that. So, and it was always, hey, what's today's word? So it was really good. I mean, it was a good experience. But with the actors, I sat and I think we had a 2-hour meeting just about production things, what does go back to one mean? You're going to be sitting there and get to have a lot of photos taken. I mean, back in that day, it was Polaroids, and hey guys, you can't go out and get your own haircut. You don't go out and get a tattoo during the middle of filming. Just little things they didn't know, and a lot of film tech terminology. We just went over that, and they were like, they just absorbed it all, and it was great. And it was, as we got into it, it was like, hey, what's that? Hey, we're using this word. Oh yeah, So it was fun, but it was they probably never learned more than they did on that movie. It was just like my very first film, Shakes the Clown, by the way. You just don't learn as much as you do the very first time you step on a set. It was great.
What Jim was saying about them not having, just production experience and everything. A few weeks into it, they were getting a little cocky and acting up a little bit. And so Ray and Polly said, hey, Jimmy, you're going to have to go talk to him and tell him, this is unauthorized. And I said, why are you sending me in there? You're the producer. You guys go tell them. And they said, no, you got a relationship with them. You go out and just tell them, they got to straighten up and fly right. This is not playtime and we're all here to make the film and, all that. And I said, okay. So I go in and I have a word with them and Luke got just a little testy with me, and I just looked at him and I said, let me tell you something, pal. On your very next movie, you're going to find out how cool this AD team is and how that we are shepherding you guys into a career. Okay? And that was the way I ended the conversation. And then I stepped out. And so and everything was cool after that. Everything was great. And then cut to about 5 years later when Luke's now a big star and he's working on Legally Blonde. And I was working on a film with Bill Paxton and we were shooting on the same lot. And I was walking across the lot and Luke's coming up in his limo being driven in. And he sees me walking across the lot and he has his driver stop and he jumps out of the car and he goes, Jimmy, you were right. You guys were the best ADs I've ever been around. We all got kind of validation for, helping them see what time it was in the show business.
I want to dive deeper into the stories from the set. But before we do, in the sense of how this film came together, when we were prepping for this episode, you guys brought to my attention that James L. Brooks and Polly Platt were producers on it. Now, Polly Platt comes in with this rich history, Say Anything, Terms of Endearment, broadcast news. What was it you think that brought these experienced producers to notice this talent, and how did that really help bring this film together?
Polly had a relationship with James, right? So her and James were working together he was one of her producers on the ground, obviously. And so my impression was that they had seen the short, probably at Sundance, and were going to roll some dice on it. And Polly was the on the ground producer for the project. She was also an incredibly big draw for me, and I'm sure a lot of people in the business, because she had such a big name, and we absolutely 100% knew how iconic and deep her credits went. And she was a little intimidating in that manner. I remember early on in prep, we went out, some of the crew after work, me, the costume people, all went out with Polly and had drinks. And she was like, telling the stories and doing the whole Hollywood thing. And I was just, I never forgot that.
Yeah, there's nothing like Polly Platt telling you Orson Welles stories on the set. It's like, oh my God, freaking Orson Welles. They lived together for a while. She definitely was the driving force. Her and Ray Zimmerman, the line producer, I can't say enough about. He made it happen, and Polly produced it. But from prepping for this, I listened to more making of documentaries, etc. And the boys could not talk about Jim Brooks enough. They said that he really taught them how to write a script, and obviously we know his scripts are amazing, and he's the one that told them how to make, Luke's character the one that everybody fell in love with and, had the empathy for, and how quirky Bignan was. But James was the one that, James L, as we call him, he was the one that drove the script. Now, when we shot, Polly was the one that was on set, and Brooks was back in LA working on his other wonderful things. But he definitely was the guy. And we had to do some additional photography at the end because they cut out a bunch, and now all of a sudden it was short, and they had to do a new beginning. And James L came to those. His famous words are pretty great. So if we cut and he thought it was good, he goes, "That's pretty great." I always remember that term. Whenever I hear it anywhere, I'm like, "That's James L. Brooks." But I think there was definitely in my head three people at the top that made it happen. They worked together obviously, but I think they each had really good, strong points and presence. That James worked on the script, Polly was on the set and worked at the producer level, and Ray made it all happen. He brought us all together. For a little independent film, we had 40 days, which was amazing. I mean, usually we were all used to doing stuff in half that time. So there was a luxury there, but there was also, we did it right. I mean, I was watching some of it today in the commentary with Wes and Owen, and they were talking about how beautiful the light was. It was like, well, we really tried to shoot certain scenes at magic hour. It almost looks like the whole movie took place at magic hour. Obviously, Bob Yeoman, the DP, he was amazing. He's one of the greatest human beings to begin with, let alone great director of photography. He just really made it happen.
I was just going to add to Bob Yeoman. Here's another quirky character, very unique, very artistic, but also incredibly fun. I can't remember a set that was so fun. And obviously the key second comes in sometimes during the lighting setups because the first's got to go into the bathroom or whatever. So, Bob was super fun in those in between moments because he would always sing a song while he was lighting. He would whistle and sing a little song, like a little ditty. He was just really funny guy, and he made the set a really great environment to be a part of.
Indeed.
And do you know anything about how they came together? Because he has done a bunch of Wes's other films. I can't say if it's all of them or not, but has it straight through?
All of them.
All of them.
Yeah.
But this was obviously their intro in film. Did they have a relationship before, or this film is just what forged it?
This was the beginning. I'm not sure how they got together. I know that Wes loved the fact that Yeoman had worked with Billy Friedkin before, and if he wanted to get something, they go, "Well, Billy would have done that," or something like that. And Wes was like, "Oh, okay," So.
Well, you guys talked about the challenges, and obviously it all worked out. But certainly, give me more insights in those first couple of weeks when clearly Wes, the Owen brothers, some of the other folks that they brought in do not have the experience and are learning. That's got to be stressful for a team of ADs.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first or second day. It rained all day. It's like, what do we do? Oh, well, let's go to the house instead of jumping outside in the yard. So that's the beauty, though, that we came from the world that you don't just add another day. You got to figure out how to get this done in the days allotted. But it definitely had its challenges. I mean, yeah, sure, they don't know the beginning. Some of the crew wasn't as experienced, although it was a very good crew. But it was. I think the good thing was that they were pretty much open. They also knew when to stick to their guns when they really needed to. Sometimes we'd go, "Okay, these crazy kids," we thought they were just little kids, even though we were kids, the newbies, but they knew their stuff. I mean, Wes, I cannot say enough. He knew what he wanted, and it's the visual. The light would go on your head when Wes would tell you things. But then in the other regard, it's like he like would set up these shots, and it's like, okay, steady cam up the narrow hallway, and we're gonna go into this room and that room and that room, and it's like, okay, we can do that, but we can't do it a lot, And I literally one time I said, "Did you ever put one of those steady cams on, Wes?" He goes, "Oh no." And so I had the guy hook it up and have him hold it and carry it. And I'll run up those stairs. He didn't do that, but it's like, then he started to realize I can't do 27 takes of a guy with a steady cam running up a narrow stairwell.
I mean, yeah, they were new to it, but the great thing about it, which I think added to the ease in which we had shooting, was that they were very grounded. They didn't have a long career. They weren't sitting in their trailer waiting to be invited. They got dressed, they hung out with us. We all hung out with them after, work, and they were really just down to earth and super fun to be around. We went out clubbing in Deep Ellum and went to see blues shows and dinners. We did all kinds of stuff with them. There was no real above the line, below the line kind of delineation. I think Jim could agree. Like these days, you kind of keep your distance a little bit from the talent because it's so loaded. They all have a lot of special needs, and they're just much more savvy, right? So you got to be a little more structured with talent. But it was very refreshing to work with them because they didn't have any airs about them. They were just there. It was just fun. It was really fun.
I think it's too because they got to do what they've been trying to do their life. They went to film school. They've been writing this forever. And then yet alone, we have worked with other people that have been pretentious, even though it's their first time on a set. And you're like, no, cut means cut, whatever. But they were sponges, I think. They wanted to know, and they learned, and they listened. And, you definitely knew when you were working with these guys. So I was like Luke and Owen, someday I'm going to be looking at them on the big screen and going, I knew them when they were, in their first movie.
Talk to me about shooting in Dallas, Texas in the mid 90s. I know that filming in Texas has kind of ebbed and flowed over the years. What was it like then? And like how much infrastructure was there? What kind of weather you dealing with? Like what kind of challenges of being there in Texas for this shoot?
I think a lot of the crew actually came from outside of Texas for one reason or another. So that part, and maybe that's because there wasn't the big infrastructure at the time. There wasn't a lot of crews at that time, but we brought a lot of people in.
I think I was hired as a local. I think I went to Dallas as a local. I mean, because I was staying with my father's friend in his guest house outside the perimeter, whatever it was called. I finally just moved to town where all the other crew was staying because, it wasn't going to work. So, yeah, I think I was a local.
Well, and for me, actually having lived in Dallas right after college, I still had a lot of friends in Dallas. I was able to actually pull in some, a bunch of my friends' kids and everything, and all the elementary school stuff. I called up all my friends, hey, you kids want to be in a movie, And so that was fun for me to kind of seeing some of my best friends' little kids that are in the background and shots and stuff. And I got my dad in the movie too, which was really fun. And the scene in the country club, wanted to have a bunch of well-dressed men in there. And so the day that we did that, I went over to Bob, and we had already placed all the extras in the scene. So I went over to Bob and I said, hey Bob, I want to put my dad in this shot, so let's find the best spot so we can really see my dad. And he goes, okay, we'll put him in that spot right there. So there was already a guy sitting there who's like a professional extra, and he was so pissed because I was making him get up, and he had already seen that the camera was pointed right at him. And he says, why are you moving me? And I said, well, because this is my dad and I'm an AD on the movie and I'm putting him here. And so, and I watched it again this morning. My dad's like in all these shots. So it was really fun for my family too, to see my dad. And Jim and Heather came over, and Scott came over for Thanksgiving at my parents' house during the making of the film. And so that was really cool. So for me, it was kind of like, even though I was out in LA at the time and working out there, but then I came back. So it was kind of like a homecoming in a way. So it was kind of fun for me, to be around a bunch of people I knew, and it's like, hey, I'm in town working on a movie. So it was kind of fun.
Robert, I was just going to dive into the weather for a quick second, because it's the key second. You're always looking at the weather report, and so I would have the TV on in the morning listening to the weather. And it was like literally almost, it felt like every day there was a tornado warning. And I remember not knowing Texas, I would probably call Jim and be like, there's a warning, or I'd call the office. There's a tornado warning saying not to go outside. And then, the locals are like, oh, you just ignore that. I'm like, okay. So every day I was like, I don't know what this means, but we're all going to work, And the day that got rained out, Jim mentioned, and it was this crazy day. I didn't realize it was the second day of shooting, but it was a flood. I was in base camp and I was literally in water up to my waist. And everybody's crew was just scattered, disappeared, couldn't find anybody. The radio wouldn't work. I was like the lone soldier in base camp I don't know what I was trying to do. And finally I gave up and went and sought shelter at some hotel lobby bar, like, a block away. And I got in there and all the electricians are sitting in there. I'm like, oh, okay, I was the dumb one. I'm standing in the water to my waist. I'm like, all right.
I think one of the things too, you say working out of town, extras was a thing. We had an extras company, and Heather worked with them really closely. But when we would do location scouting, it wasn't a central casting, blonde girls, beautiful people. There was characters, their faces told a story. And we'd be scouting, and Wes would say, "Hey, Jim, see that guy over there? Could you see if he'd be in this scene?" Or I'm like, "Sure. Hey, dude, on November 22nd, what are you going to be doing? Can you come here?" And the guy's like, "I don't have a home." Yeah, sure, I'll show up. There's no cell phone number for the guy or anything like that, but I can't tell you how many people we got like that. I'd have this list, Joe Blow, who lives in, Deep Ellum. He said he's going to be there on that day, and here's his number. And do it. But I think it shows, though. There was a lot of, if you watch the making of the behind the scenes with the guys, they'll say, "Oh, that's so and so. Oh, that's my mother's cousin. That's somebody else." But even if they were those people, they looked really good. There was, I think the term would be, there was a weathered look to the background. They were just looked real.
I was rewatching the film last night, and honestly, I think you and Jimmy were both spot on in your cameos, like casting wise.
So if we are motivating people to go watch the film again, each of you describe your cameo, talk a little about how that came about. And so when people are watching, they know to look for you this time. Jim, you go first.
Oh, I'm in the scene with the most famous line in the whole movie. Heather, what is it? Something about Cleveland.
Oh God,
On the run, on the run from Johnny Law.
Johnny Law.
Ain't
That's
no
it. On the
trip
run.
to Cleveland. On the run from Johnny Law. It ain't no trip to Cleveland.
That's it. So they'd done their first big heist, and now it's the next day, and it's the sun's up now, and they're getting gas. And while we were talking about the scene, Wes goes, "Oh, could you be the gas station attendant?" And I go, "Sure, I'll be the gas station attendant." And he goes, "Will you cut your hair?" And I said, "Sure." He's my first AD. I go, "What kind?" He goes, "Let's see Junior over there, the transpo captain." He goes, "Cut it like that." And I go, "Junior, what do you say when you go to the barber?" And he goes, "Oh, I just ask him for a number one," which is basically a brush cut. And I'm like, "Great. Anything you want, Wes." And we actually, Bob and I are in the background. Luke and Owen are in the foreground doing their chat about where their predicament. And we're in the background. And we had actually worked out some, improv, which Wes was going to shoot. It was going to be my big debut. And then we got behind. And I said, "Wes, let's get out of here. We don't need that little airtime for me and Bob." So I'm the gas station attendant. Jimmy, who are you?
I'm at the fireworks stand, the guy operating the fireworks stand where they get the bottle rockets. And it was really fun when we did that because it was just improv, the whole thing. It was cut to music in the final film, but when we were shooting, it was really fun because, I was going, "Well, you need one of these right here. This is a great thing."
That scene was shot a little differently than the rest of the film because it looks like it was all handheld. He was kind of whip panning through.
Yeah.
So it was cool.
I was almost a little disappointed when they cut it to music because I was like, man, there was all this great, back and forth with all of us. We were just all yakking back and forth, Owen and I and Bob and everything. But hey, I still made the cut. So.
And Jimmy, you've got a bunch of acting credits on your IMDb page. Is this the proto of your interest in that, or did you bring that to your cameo in Bottle Rocket?
Well, I started out actually in high school. I went to high school with Bill Paxton, and Bill and I were really good friends. And I was studying acting high school and college, but I also was getting a film degree and started working production. Acting was always of an interest, but it was always on the back burner because I was also interested in production too, and started out camera assisting, and then got into production, and then met Jim, and he helped shepherd me into the AD world, and then I kept at that for long enough to get in the Directors Guild, actually on a film with Bill on Frailty, and I've had a little bit part in Frailty, so I was always acting was kind of always there. And then my joke is that when I became middle-aged, bald, and started wearing glasses, I started getting character acting work. And so I actually did stop working in production. I had about a 10-year run doing commercials, and oddly enough, almost all of them were shown in Canada. And I was a spokesperson for a Canadian financial company and went to China to do a commercial. I mean, it was just insane. And then I've done, a number of films here and there, but I have to be very careful whenever I do work as an actor, because I always have likened that I'm a better actor because I worked production and worked as an AD. And so every time I do work as an actor, production loves me because I'm on time, I'm ready to go, I'm not a pain in the ass. I know the drill, although I don't walk around going, hey, I'm in the, because that makes people nervous. But it's also made me a better actor because I do know what's going on and I come prepared and I jump in and I'm ready to go. And I get it in one or two takes and go, yeah, time to go to lunch. See ya, bye.
Any other notable cameos we should watch for? Heather, did you manage to carve out enough time to ever get on the other side of camera?
Not on that one.
Yeah, David Wasco, the production designer, played the soccer coach. In the bus scene, that's a good one. Scott Peterson's the script writer is clearly in the back, like 2-3 rows behind the guys. And actually right behind Luke is Wes. You can see the top of his head because he's looking down at a monitor, but he's literally in the row right behind him. Just you see his head, all the time.
Yeah, Jim, I watched that scene again this morning when you said that. And I noticed that off to the right is one of the electric guys was on the bus too. He's just sitting there and he's like looking at the camera the whole time.
Yeah,
Shot.
the
It was
mixer
hilarious.
obviously was there. He was mixing, he just sat in the seat. You didn't see, back in those days, there was a Nagra for you young folks. That's before digital sound. We just all got on the bus, shoot it.
Jim, do you remember what cameras we shot on by chance?
What's that?
What did we shoot on camera-wise? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember.
Hmm.
I have to ask Johnny Boccaccio, the fastest first AC in the world. Man, that guy was amazing. I mean, he literally was as fast changing film as they change cards nowadays. I mean, I was like, you're done. I used to use that as a little breather. Okay, changing the mag, and he was literally the fastest guy ever. He was also a great guy.
Yeah, really great.
There was only one person on that crew that was a curmudgeon, and he will remain nameless. But everybody was really like pretty cool. It was pretty amazing, right?
Hey, well, the curmudgeon didn't wind up finishing the movie though, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So
Speaking of the electricians, one of the electricians has become a production executive at Fox Disney. So it's funny to remember him back dragging the 4-aughter.
was that Jeff?
Yeah, Jeff.
He is.
He's at Fox, Disney Fox is what production exec. He's been there for a long time. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say that didn't really surprise me. He was a sharp kid back then, I remember.
Yeah. And fun.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit more about filming in the mid 90s. A couple of things you said, Jim, we didn't have cell phones. You had to actually get people's numbers. And then Heather, you sent me over some of the call sheets and they're handwritten, which I think is incomprehensible, even by the time I was working in the 2000s, that we were already moving to computers. But the amount of time it takes to do a handwritten call sheet every day. Talk to me a little bit about how the challenges that we've forgotten about, but that talking about this film brings back.
I mean, I did handwritten call sheets for years. It was always a mechanical pencil because they were a really sharp tip, right? And it had the eraser. And I was really caught. I mean, it was funny to look at those call sheets because my handwriting, it's just reminds me of that whole thing. And I was always just trying to impress Jim Goldthwait. Honestly, I just wanted to do well for Jim, because Jim is very, very good at his job. And my whole goal was to make him happy and make him look good. So yeah, it was always, and also because when I started working with Jim, I was a second. So, and he was the key second. So obviously I was following his whole system of how he did the job and emulated the way that he worked because I respected him so much and still respect him. So, but yeah, it was all about writing perfectly. So the call sheet looked great,
You guys both had amazing penmanship. And I'm sure a lot of people appreciate it because back in those days, you'd be like, what the hell is this word? And that was one of the best things when we went digital. And also I was looking at the call sheets. There's a lot of just stamps, add 1/2 hour. Nowadays they just wait till wrap and then they put out the 6 o'clock one or put out the 6:30 one. You make two and you just send the one you like. Back then, and then Heather, I mean, just Xeroxing the call sheet. What did we do back then? Did we?
Well,
I don't even think we had one, did we? Or
yeah, of course
and then
we
the
did.
Kinkos.
We was always sending transpo to Kinkos, and
Yeah.
I mean, this happened for years, right? You'd talk, and I always wanted to talk to the guy taking the call sheet to Kinkos. It was always like stressed out, right? Because it's like, whatever, martini or what. I don't even think we did prelims back then, Jim. There were no prelims, no. So you'd give the call sheet to the transpo guy, and then you would just be like on pins and needles waiting to like get it back. Because there were no phones at that time. And then, as the years progressed, obviously, then now there's phones and you're like standing next to the captain going, where is he? Have you talked to him? Is he Xeroxing? Is it going through the Xeroxing machine? It was always just a panic,
Yeah, then they call and say, oh, the place is closed. And shit like that. You'd always get, oh, they got to go to the next one. And there was always the fight, though, on who went. Because we want the sharpest driver, and they don't want to send the sharpest driver. They want to send Ted, who just got off his job as a carny or something. I'm like, whoa, does he know how to use a Xerox machine, or can he, bargain with these people? But there's been a million of those. I mean, back then I remember a production manager giving me a roll of quarters to make calls.
Sioux City, that production manager made, and there was phones back then, but he refused to let me use the phone. That guy's name I forgot. Thank God.
The movie Jimmy and I met on was during the big earthquake here in the Northridge quake. So we woke up and somehow my roommate got a hold of me. And then we had two of those long phones, those big block phones, basically. And I just went on set and said, here they are. And just use it and be quick as you can and get it to another crew member. And, for the next 2 hours, you always see a crew member walking off, calling his wife and calling, whoever, making sure everything was okay.
Yeah, it was always one phone. Everybody had to come to one person with the phone.
That was crazy. Did you hear about the earthquake? Like, oh my God, what? Nowadays everybody hears about it because we all got that computer in our hand.
Yeah.
That's definitely evolved. Film itself evolved. We were talking about how fast Johnny Picacho was, but it was a totally different thing. And then the different film types, we're shooting nights, we got to change stocks, things like that. And, that's a big deal, even for them figuring that out nowadays, the guy AC's just, it's a computer on the camera and they just plug it in and they change it and change the stop and change everything. It's all computerized. Back then, the guys had to, be a little more sophisticated. The ACs had their Kelly wheels and, it was a big deal. And sometimes we'd go, do we have enough film to last tonight? It's a Friday night. What do we do? Captain Rawstock.
Yeah, they're loading short ends.
Ooh.
Short ends, oh God.
I've had a few directors who will remain anonymous that short ends. They did not like that.
I was going to say too about the call sheets. We have the little line with the quote of the day, and I was kind of scamming through them and just reading like some of the quotes, which brings back a lot of memories. And you're like, oh yeah. And then at some point, if there's no quote of the day on there, how stressed out it must have been, because at some point you're like, fuck that quote of the day. I got to get this call sheet out. It always added another 10 or 15 minutes on there because you want to be clever. And I'm like, some days if it's not there, then it was a stressful call sheet day. So.
Heather also had photos of the day on some of them. That was cool.
Yeah, Polaroids, but I wish, like you said, we can't really make them out copies.
You guys drew my attention as well that for the hotel with the pool, that was a little further out. Is that right? I don't know how close Hillsboro, Texas is to Dallas, where you guys were based.
It's about an hour out of Dallas.
Okay. Did folks then relocate for filming on location, or was that just extra back and forth on that?
No, we stayed in the hotel. In the motel. It was great. That was when the real fun began.
That 2 weeks we never forgot. We still talk about Hillsboro. It was literally the only thing there. It was literally an exit for gas and this hotel. Like there was nothing at all there. So, but super fun.
Yeah. And one of the great things about that too during that is that Mac Downs, who was the set dresser, totally took over his room and took set dressing and redecorated his whole hotel room into a little party barn. And Mac had a thing that he had a floor lamp with the green light bulb in it. And if that was outside his door, that meant the green light was on and the party was on. So every night, if we saw the green light on, then it was a party at Mac's room. And like I said, he had taken over and just moved everything out and had different furniture in there. It was crazy. So that was just really fun that we had that time because we were shooting there and just at the end of the day, just walked to somebody's room. It was great.
Those other rooms are where all of you are,
Yeah.
not just like beyond the set rooms.
We were in other rooms, just,
The whole hotel.
the whole hotel. And of course they loved us because, they were, oh my God, there's a Hollywood movie being made here in Hillsboro. They loved it.
There was a few rooms that were still open to the public because there's a great truck crossing in one of the scenes at the pool. Look through the thing, and this truck that carried cars on it went through at the perfect time. It was like, and I'm like, there's no way I had that go through again. The guy just left, So we looked at on some action in the background that we just, there's what do? You only have so many PAs, you can only lock up so much. But we did take over that hotel, that's for darn sure, which was great. If somebody was late, it's like, well, go to room 236 and knock again, All right.
Yeah, there's nowhere to hide.
No.
Now, going back again to the actors who were in this, is it fair to say that James Caan was the largest name? And I'm curious whether all his stuff was shot in a short period of time or whether he also got caught up in sort of the atmosphere you guys are talking about. What was it like working with him?
It was James Caan, man. A rock star. We did schedule around him. Actually, the Hero House was the character Bob's house was a Frank Lloyd Wright house. And we shot a good majority of it out, and then we left and had to come back when Jimmy was in town. And I don't think Wes was afraid of him, but he was like, "Oh my God, I'm working with a real actor." So he would, he would try to. He knew his way around a set. Let's put it that way. He'd say, "Hey, Jim, we're not going to do this, are we?" And I'd go, "We're going to do it as many times as Wes wants." I mean, what are you going to do? The guy he was who he was. And I think when he was in a scene and the new younger actors were in it, they were just like, "Oh my God, that's James Caan," which a lot of people are. So it was fun. I remember one of my favorite non-filming things was he was sitting at the piano and played and sang Danny Boy in between a lighting setup. It was just like, oh my God, that was my Christmas present. But he definitely, he knows what he wants and he's pretty much going to get it. And luckily he did what he brought certain things to it. I highly recommend if people can get the version with Wes and Owen chatting about it. It's pretty eye-opening about how they thought about Jimmy. And, he brought his karate mentor with him and he was in the movie. It's just so funny how he just, sure, yeah, we'll put him in the movie, make him in there, whatever you want, sir.
So that scene with the karate is his Jimmy Caan's actual karate.
Yeah, it's his guy. And I think, I don't know if it's that scene or another scene, Wes wanted the karate master in his underpants, just standing there in his underpants going through the routine. And if you watch the behind the scenes, James Caan was a little concerned that was humiliating to the guy. And Wes listened to him, and then Wes goes, "Yeah, but it's funny." He was right. It was. I think also one of our favorite characters, his first movie was Kumar, who was literally amazing. And if people don't know any of his backstory, I mean, there's footage of him on the Ed Sullivan show spinning plates, going all down the line and everything. I guess he was like an acrobat too. I mean, he was amazing and probably one of the sweetest guys in the world. But he was also a guy you'd have to, okay, when we say action, you start talking or whatever, stand on this mark here, So those were things that maybe we lost a take or two a day because we'd have to just go back and really explain, it's important for you to be here so we can get focus and your face will look good and you won't be blurry. And, especially some of the day players that were, friends, et cetera. And we'd have to have boot camp a little more often. I think maybe we even brought them in early and Jimmy would go over film terms with them so they weren't totally lost when they got there.
Yeah. But I think though I think part of the naivete of Kumar is also what made his performance so great. In a way, he's just sort of detached from reality.
He was funny all the time. Like he was just naturally funny. And I just remember hanging with him I don't know where, somewhere on set, but he was very approachable and genuine and just really funny. And he actually ran a yoga studio, ironically. And somehow Jim and I ended up at his yoga studio on a weekend. And we were the only two people in the class. He did like a private class for Jim and I. I think I mean, maybe I'd heard the word yoga. I mean, this was 93, 94. And we took a yoga class and we have pictures with Kumar. I think I sent those to you. Very, very, it's a great memory,
Yeah, he beat me up, man. I thought we were going to do some stretching. He was like, I was like, what?
Yeah, he had us on one foot and, arm in the air. I mean, I've never done yoga before. So,
and it kind of was almost hot yoga, wasn't it? I mean, or I sweated my pants off. Maybe that was why I thought it was hot yoga. He was great. Good guy. He's so sweet. But Jimmy hit it. There's scenes in the robbery where he's like confused and didn't know where to go. And there was no acting involved there. He was just literally like, oh, where do I go? Tell me what to do. But he makes a remark in there too. And it's very funny.
That's what made his performance so great to me in a way. It's got a weird kind of comedic timing about it because it's kind of off, because you don't really expect it.
I also think I don't think Bob Musgrave got enough credit because a lot of his stuff he would
Bob
do.
was really great in that. I agree with you wholeheartedly, Jim.
Yeah.
He really had some great moments in that.
He's playing the Bob Mapplethorpe character, their other friend.
Yeah.
he was very natural and he's very genuine on screen. Like when you watch his performance, he's just a natural,
He's also nonverbal acting, like he'll trip and fall in the background. You're like, Bob thought about that. He's running through there and he knew he was going to fall, but I don't think any of us knew that was going to happen. And he just would do little nuances that, he really cared about his character and it shows through on the screen. It was great.
Wasn't he a musician in real life? Wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
A really good blues guitar player.
Wow.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, he should have continued on performing. I don't know I didn't track his career.
Well, I think, it's show business. It's a tough racket, boys and girls.
Bill Murray took over for Bob in the Wes's future.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Same thing with Andrew too. Andrew got a few more shots with some of their different projects with Luke and Owen, but
Andrew Wilson, who played Bob Mapplethorpe's older brother, Future Man, right?
Future Man. Yeah. I was watching that scene. One of my favorite lines of Owen's in there is when he rides the little scooter up and is trying to talk Anthony into doing it, and Future Man pulls up and is making fun of him, and then when he drives off, it's my favorite Owen. Well, one of my favorite Owen lines in there. She goes, "I'm really sometimes more confident than I seem." It was really a great moment.
Wes and Owen were talking about that scooter. Apparently, Wes and Bob Yeoman were scouting, and a guy drove up on that thing, and on the fender it said $275 or something, and they wanted to buy it right there. But the guy was like, "Well, I got to get home," and so, but they went back and bought that scooter just when they were scouting. It was things like that. Oh, well, let's take what's happening in real life and incorporate it into the script.
And it was hilarious. That moment was hilarious of him.
Oh.
Riding around on that scooter.
And they were also talking about how a lot of people just saying stuff in real life got in there, like James Brooks' sayings would get in there, and Owen and Wes, they heard somebody say something and they just throw it right in. So they were really good about it. I mean, it's real, you know what I mean? Even though it's quirky and these characters you like, that doesn't exist. A lot of it really does exist. We all have that Dignan-esque friend that you're just like, what is Joey doing today? I think that's part of the charm.
Were there other quirky moments, either on set or off set, that talking about this is bringing up for you?
Tell about this shirt, the shirt that
What Heather's talking about, there was a scene at the hotel, and Stignan's talking to one of the other housekeepers, and at the end she throws a drink on him, which I learned another thing in the behind the scenes. I guess they just went to me and said, we want to do this, or Owen wasn't in on it. So, but I'm like, they bought it at a thrift store. There was no doubles, there was no nothing. It's like, okay, well, it's got to be the last shot of this scene because we're not going to get it cleaned and back. We'll end the night in it. But Wes didn't tell Owen that she was going to throw the drink. So she told him, and he thought he was going to get a good reaction out of Owen, like, oh, and act like pissed off and everything. But Owen was pissed off. So she threw it, and he said, "Who told you to do that?" And then she goes, and she pointed to Wes, and Wes is like behind the scenes going, "Yeah, it didn't quite come out the way I thought it was going to motivate you in your performance." So I was like, "Okay, that's it. That's a rep. Let's go home. No more shirts."
just to add to that because it was a very unique shirt, obviously, but also there's all of that scattered through the whole film. Like, Dignan carrying the TWA bag is so specific, but super quirky and just totally works. Like everything that is so unique in there, all these little flourish details are so specific, but they all are part of the story, like of these people, they really sell these people, I mean, even the way Bob was dressed in this sort of like black suit with the collar up, and it didn't look like a costume. It looked like what he should have been wearing. All of it looks really organic to me now that I'm looking at it again. Also, Lumi only spoke Spanish, right? She didn't speak English, that actress, when we had
No,
her.
she didn't. Yeah, because yeah, I was having a little problems communicating with her from time to time. But she was a sweetheart, really a sweet and great actress.
Well, I want to go out on a limb, and you guys tell me if it's true, though, that being small film like this, as you said, indie film, but where everybody's rowing in the same direction, it gives you room to do these sort of things. It sounds like the size of the crew and the production, it was just in a very sweet spot. You've got room to do these other elements. And I'm curious if that was just sort of the energy there as well, or was it lightning in a bottle?
I think it was, like you said, we came from the independent world, and this was a little bit more budget than most our films. Most our films were in $1-2 million. This is quoted as 5. I think it was a little bit more, but it did give us breathing room. Like I was talking to Ray when he hired me, and he goes, "Now, Jim, just realize we can work with it because we do have a little money. If you got to drop a scene, don't do what we usually do in an independent world and go, what the hell are we going to do? Or how are we ever going to make it up?" We had a little latitude. So it did take away a little bit of the day-to-day stress that we usually have as ADs on those small 18-day shoots, 24-day shoots. Okay, well, I had to put my thinking cap on and figure out how to restructure the schedule, but we knew that we did have a little bit of breathing room, more or less. If it rained, there's not much you can do. We of course adjusted on the second, third day of filming, but we had room to adjust, which was nice. I can't emphasize enough, between Ray and Polly, they just took a lot of the weight off of my shoulders. I could go to them any day and just here's the straight poop, and they would come up with a way to get out of it, or we would brainstorm. It was really collaborative. I mean, you do that every show, but I felt like they were really on my team, or on my side, as opposed to, oh shit, the producer's gonna, because I spent $20. I remember one day I did a low budget movie, and I forgot one actor I didn't break them for lunch, and they got, I don't know, $50 in meal penalties, and I $1 day that day and gave the producer the money because they were such a jerk to me about one freaking meal penalty. These guys weren't that. They got it. And everybody believed in what we were making, which was, it's nice. It is kind of rare. It's getting worse nowadays because everybody's just trying to make a product as opposed to, something you can be proud of.
Well, I think that's true. I mean, and we all agreed that it was one of the most fun and creative films that all of us have ever worked on. It's certainly one of the top of my list. But it was also because of the atmosphere that Polly and Ray and Jim, created that. I hadn't felt this on too many films where there was really a sense of collaboration and everybody, pulling together. And I've always felt like that this can be duplicated if you do things right. And that was one of the things that I felt was really important about this film, is that, you can have fun doing this and still and come up with something that's really great and creative. You don't have to beat people over the head all the time. And when you're doing something that everyone feels a part of, then the end product is even better because there is this collective energy that's pushing it forward.
Well, this was art, right? We were making art on this film, and that was clear to me, right? So, and they were also nurturing James, Polly, Ray were nurturing new talent, a new filmmaker, and they really believed in them, obviously. So I think that was part of the vibe too. It wasn't so much that Polly was the producer, but she was, yeah. And I mean, they were just supportive of the product, which obviously is evident in the fact they gave us 40 days to shoot that film, because they would never give a film like that 40 days now. Like, that's crazy. I can't even believe it was a 40-day shoot. I had forgotten. It's a generous schedule for the size of this film. And also the scenes weren't super, like, they weren't big, huge scope scenes, right? It was 2 or 3 character scenes. So I think that was a luxury that they set the shoot up like that.
We're a couple of years shy of the 30th anniversary of this film's release. And at that time, everybody's going to be talking about their memories. Thank you guys for coming on here and doing this early. This was a lot of fun. You have given me a ton of materials that we're going to try and share. Check out our Facebook page. If not there, I'll have a link in the notes for this episode where we can see a lot of the call sheets and the script notes and other materials that you guys have saved over the years. On that note, we're going to call it a wrap. Great having you here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Listeners, let us know what you thought of the film. You'll find my contact info at our website, belowtheline1word.biz. That's B-I-Z. I'm going to go around, let folks know where they can watch your more recent work or what they should be watching for that you've got coming out next. Jim, why don't you kick us off?
I'm currently working on my tan, and that's about it. But I just, in the beginning of the year, I did season 3 of the Sex Lives of College Girls on HBO Max. It's coming out in November.
Thanks, Jim. Heather, what have you been working on?
As we all know, it's really slow right now, but I did do a Pee Wee Kirkland documentary about this famous basketball player, a legend in 2 games. So that was super fun. It was a totally different format, and we traveled to LA, Atlanta, and New York, and I did a little bit of work for a photo unit on Forever television series. And yeah, that's all I got at the moment.
Well, we're hoping things pick up. Jimmy, what have you been up to?
Not much these days. I'm actually kind of working on writing a project that I've been researching for a number of years. And I still do a little bit of acting from time to time. And last year I did a Western with James Paxton and Malcolm McDowell. I just got a brief moment in the film playing a surly cowboy, but I get to tell Malcolm McDowell what time it is. So I got a good little laugh in the movie, and so it's a great little moment.
Well, I know that the work situation in Hollywood is very serious, so not to make light of that at all. But if you guys find yourselves with more free time, you're welcome back here on the show. Love having you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music, John Wan for our logo, and to all our listeners, I appreciate you. The Below the Line logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. Please rate us wherever you get your podcasts, and most importantly, tell your friends. Thanks again from Below the Line. So, Jim, you mentioned earlier when you're talking about James L. Brooks giving advice on the writing, you talked about the opening scenes were added on to pad out the film. Is that to say that the escape sequence wasn't part of the original shooting, or were you referencing something else?
No, that's it. The escape sequence was totally after they cut the film together, and originally it was just Owen and Luke walking down a street, and I forgot what they were chatting about, but for some reason they wanted more of a backstory to explain that Luke was in a mental facility, so they went back and did that. I think also it's because they cut out a lot of stuff. Like there's a lot taken out just before my scene. There is a chunk of the script was taken out, so they ended up with a fairly short movie. So they had to ad. So they did the breaking out and the bus trip. So
And did all of you come back for that, or
after.
did they just get another crew to do pickups?
I was there.
I don't remember
Were you
being there,
guys-
but I might have been on something else at that time.
I was not.
Just me all by myself. I shot the whole thing.
Where was that, Jim? Where did they shoot the additional stuff?
You know what? It was in Camarillo, which is now Channel Islands College. And it was a real mental facility at some point. But since then, they've renovated it and everything. And well, you've all watched it, obviously. The guy that's the professor, whatever, is Ned Dowd. He was one of the execs on the film.
He was great,
So,
actually.
yeah, good
Maybe
guy.
he was
And
there. Might have been there.
I think
I'll
those scenes
see
are
if there's a
really
cross-
important as far as setting the stuff. But the short starts with them walking on the street, but I think those scenes really do add a lot to it. So, hey, we're lucky it came
Yeah.
together.
established quite a bit, established all of Luke's character, and then also what a sweet, innocent human being he was. But also it established that he wanted to help his friends so bad that he fakes climbing out the window, I mean, it's like it just totally established him, and obviously that established Ignan right from the moment. The gates were open and he went running. So it was great.